Well, it's lovely to catch up with you again, Mark. It's about a year since we last had a conversation, and a lot has happened since then. So I'd like to begin our conversation by asking how you are.
Well, I'm up and down like a bloody yo-yo is the easy answer to that one. I've made the point on so many of my videos that I've been doing over the previous weeks that I seem to run through every possible emotion that a person can in this human experience in the course of the average day. So I'll go from deeply depressed and absolutely at rock bottom at what I see unfolding in the world around me, all the way through every emotion in between to wild hope and optimism for great things happening just round the corner. And it's no exaggeration to say that I go through all of that in the course of the average day. I do have good days and bad days. Today's not been a great day, to be honest, but I am improving now at the end of this day. I'm starting to sort of cope with things. On another day that we could have spoken, you would have found me in a more optimistic frame of mind, but there's no telling when those days will fall, because there's no telling what is going to come across my agenda on any of these days. And my moods and emotions are very much dictated by who I've been speaking to that day and what sort of information I've had dumped in my lap during the course of the last few hours. Because one way or another, I seem to have become a kind of conduit for information in these times in which we find ourselves. And a lot of people have come to see me as some kind of spokesperson for our shared experiences, and because of that I get a whole load of messages in the course of any one day, and unfortunately 95% plus of the information that I'm getting sent is doom, gloom and dread. It's very negative. It's looking at the worst possible outcome of all of this for humanity, and that can't fail to have an effect on somebody on the receiving end of that day after day. So I do find that all the doom and gloom and dread in my inbox tends to affect my moods and emotions and my outlook. Fortunately, around 5% of what I get sent is full of hope and optimism and positivity, and I think it's that 5% that is keeping me going and not allowing me to reach for the nearest piece of rope, So in a roundabout way of answering your question, I'm all over the place, but I think most people are, to be honest, in these times, because planning has become a thing of the past. So if anyone bought you a 2020 diary or calendar as a Christmas present, it was a bit of a waste of money, wasn't it? Because you can dash that thing in the bin, because you can't really plan for anything. And that kind of brings us round to the reason we're talking today, I guess, Gloria, which is the event that you're putting on at the end of this year in December. And I think anyone planning any kind of event in 2020 is undertaking a revolutionary kind of act, because it really does seem to be an act of rebellion in these times, doesn't it? Wouldn't you say?
It's interesting you say that, because that was very much the spirit in which I decided one day I will go for it again. And I felt that I would be letting down everybody if I didn't say that we would give it a go.
Right.
We would try and get together once again, a group of like-minded people with wonderful speakers, to talk about the past and, over dinner, the present. Of course, as you say, planning is very much a thing of the past, and it could be that we don't succeed. But I do think we should push the boat out and
Absolutely.
Really give it a go. And anybody who books, I hasten to add, would of course get a full refund should the event not go ahead.
Right.
So in the spirit of positivity, and I take your point that we must be positive if we can, we're going to give this as good a shot as we can.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important for people to have events like this to go to, all the more so in these times, because one of the major things we've all been lacking this year is social contact with others. And that is a big part of what's being done to us through this psychological operation that is called COVID-19. Because there's no doubt that many aspects of what we're having done to us amount to psychological torture, mental torture. And a big part of that is us being kept apart from other people. So we've heard stories of families that have been split through the lockdown restrictions. And depending on how closely people have been following what the treacherous government has been telling them in terms of their instructions, many families have not seen each other for several months. We've heard stories of people not seeing their elderly parents because they've been told they can't by the government. So they've gone months and months and months without seeing their mum and dad, and grandparents have gone months and months without seeing their grandkids. And this is just cruel, it's tortuous, it's completely unnecessary. You know, we can go into the finer detail of it, but I think at this late stage in the game, we've all seen and heard so much to know that all of that was completely avoidable and achieved absolutely nothing in terms of keeping us safe. But then again, this whole coronavirus narrative has not been about keeping us safe from some beastly virus. I think so many of us have realised that there are many ulterior motives on the agenda here. But social contact is an essential part of the human experience, the human condition. It's very important for us to be around like-minded people. And, you know, we've had these phrases like social distancing, which of course is an oxymoron because it's nothing of the sort. It's anti-social by its very definition. Keeping people apart is not social. So we've been told that we can't have the gatherings that we used to. We've not been able to attend meet-up events. We've not been able to go to the pub, to go to the cafe, to have a coffee or a beer with our friends. We've been told that we can't attend conferences. Any kind of social get-together has been pretty much outlawed over the course of the past several months. So that's why I call it a revolutionary act for anyone to actually put one of these things on where people can, in person, get together with other individuals. All this virtual stuff that we've been conditioned and entrained through mind control to accept as being just as good as being there in person, just as good as the real thing. We've had all these commercials on the TV being pounded into our subconscious over the past several weeks, where we've seen people doing everything imaginable via a Zoom or a WhatsApp or a Skype video link on their computer or on their smartphone. So people have been exercising, they've been doing yoga classes, they've been doing cookery classes together. They've been waving hi to their mum on the screen, you know, and the implication has been, well, you know, I know we can't get together with these people, but it's just as good doing it on your smartphone. You know, thank God we've got this technology which enables us to do all this. Well, absolutely not. It's nowhere near as effective, as beneficial, and as therapeutic as being there in the flesh, as being able to pick up on the vibes of somebody else, being able to interact with other people and be a part of the atmosphere that can only be generated when people come together and pool their, you know, frequencies and vibrations. And just reading each other's emotions and facial expressions, which is kind of difficult when everyone's got a bloody face nappy covering the bottom half of their face, but that's another matter as well. So social events have become very important, and I think there's so much value that we can appreciate that they hold through having been deprived of them for so many months. So they're very important, and it's unfortunate we've not had more opportunities to attend events like this. So I really hope this does go ahead in December. As you've said, anything can happen, and it's anybody's guess, but at least we're giving it a crack, and we can keep our fingers crossed that we find ourselves in 4 months in, hopefully, a better condition than we are now, and able to actually see this thing go ahead.
Well, yes, we can but hope, and we've got the big event of the American election between now and then, and maybe that will pave the way for an event like this.
Oh, gotta hope so.
We have to hope. But we've talked about the current situation and how it's affected social relations in a very negative sense. How has the current situation affected the priorities that you've set yourself in your work? For example, is the world of popular music and popular entertainment still your main focus, or are you finding yourself spending more time looking now at the bigger picture?
Well, I've done pretty much zero work on the music industry and the entertainment industry at large, which is my specialist area of interest, and I've been known for that through my work right the way up to the start of 2020. I was that guy that looks into the music industry and discovers all the skullduggery and shenanigans that go on there. But I've just found myself, first of all, not able to focus and concentrate on any of that stuff in any kind of meaningful way since this lockdown narrative kicked off back in March. But also, in all good conscience, I've just not found myself able to continue doing that kind of work when my input and whatever skills and benefits I can bring to the table would be better employed addressing the monumental scam that the COVID-19 narrative is. I am a researcher, I'm a broadcaster and a podcaster and a speaker, and I've had to bring those skills and that knowledge to the table in terms of making a contribution and adding my voice to all the other voices out there to implore the masses to wake up to what's really going on here. Because the key to putting this scamdemic to bed once and for all can only lie in a critical mass of the general public begrudgingly coming to terms with the fact that we've been lied to big time over this whole thing, and that it's full of duplicity and deception the whole way. As I said a short while back, it's nothing about keeping us safe from a virus, and it's everything to do with what the virus is being used as an excuse to bring in, to justify all kinds of outrageous affronts on our rights and freedoms, which is what's really going on here. So I've had to address this situation and throw myself fully into it, and it surprised me how it's really taken off for me in terms of me becoming a voice for this type of information now. Because when I started back in March making my very first videos about the COVID-19 scam, I had around 9.5k subscribers to my YouTube channel. I'd been struggling for months to get past the 10,000 subscriber barrier. But very quickly after I started making these videos, I found my subscriber figures going absolutely through the roof. I've not checked recently, but I'm somewhere near 35k now from not being able to break the 10k barrier back in March. And the volume of correspondence that I now get is absolutely phenomenal. Without any kind of exaggeration or lie, I get at least 100 emails a day. And Facebook messages as well, and other types of communication from people that have discovered me through the work I've been doing on this COVID-19 thing in terms of exposing what's really going on. These are people that knew nothing about my work in the entertainment industry and talking about the music industry. They've discovered all of that afterwards, but they've discovered me as a result of the COVID work that I've been putting in. And so much of that was triggered by the rant video that I did in my car back in early April, I think it was. And this was entirely from the heart. It was me just venting furiously and sounding off about an experience that I'd just had going into my town where I'd had to buy a few things. And it was the very early days of all this absolute ritualistic madness that people are going through and sadly becoming so entrained into adopting now. And it was people queuing up outside stores. You have the little Stasi general on the front door of the store who's telling you when you can go in, what direction you have to walk around the store in, what bits of tape you have to follow on the floor, ensuring you stay 2 meters away from the person in front, and all this absolute complete insanity. And I'd come back from a deeply depressing visit into town where I'd witnessed this in multiple shops, and I just felt like exploding. So I sat in my car. I didn't want to do it in the house because I thought there might be some strong language, didn't want my kids to hear, so I shut myself in the car, put the camera on, and just spoke straight from the heart to the camera and sounded off. And I was mad, and this came through on the video, and so many people got in touch with me as a result of that video, saying that I had articulated exactly how they felt about the situation. And, it could have been their words right there on the video. And, literally tens of thousands of people have found me as a result of that video and have reached out to me and have followed my work ever since. So I've been doing pretty much a weekly update video, usually on a Saturday, giving my thoughts and reflections on this whole situation as the weeks have unfolded. And it just rounds up things that have happened in the previous few days. I give my take on it, add a bit of commentary, a few thoughts and reflections and insights, and people really seem to have found value in that. And as I say, I'm communicating with so many other people now who can see exactly what I'm saying, and they realise that there's so much more to it than we're being told. And it is gratifying, it is encouraging for me to hear from so many people and realise that my work has resonated with them. But it also brings it home to me how much more work there still is to do in terms of winning over the masses. And all I've got to do to remind me of the monumental task that awaits us all is take another trip into town and see the way people are still behaving outside supermarkets and walking around in masks and stuff. And it's a very sobering, jarring reminder of how much there still is to do and conquer in all of this.
Well, yes, and you have such an important role, not least because you are one of a very small number of British voices.
That's right.
Yeah. So how do you see positive change happening on planet Earth? Do you think that a growing number of people understand the falsehoods that fill both the present and the past? And must you grow an even greater constituency of people who understand these falsehoods before we can see any positive change?
Well, absolutely you do. And many more people, as I just said, are needed to come over on the side of truth. I can understand why people are reluctant to accept that the world is nothing like they thought it was. It's a devastating revelation for people. I have to think back to the process that I went through 10 years ago. I was going through these acceptances in 2010, so I had a kind of 10-year lead-in to the situation we're now in. But I have to remain mindful that many people are discovering for the very first time in their lives, and they might be very advanced in life. You know, I have people in their 60s and 70s reaching out to me and saying that they've come to terms with the fact that the world is not what they thought it was and that we're being lied to about everything. So I have to have some sympathy for the fact that it's a very difficult process for people to go through. But having said that, I look around me at all the absolute insanity in which we're now living and the ridiculous, infantile cover stories that we're being given by the government and the mainstream media, and I scratch my head as to how it's possible for any grown adult to still not realise that this whole thing is a scam and a sham and is nothing like what it's being presented to us as. Just looking at the flip-flopping and the contradictions and the discrepancies in what's told to us by the government should be enough to tell people this. We've settled into this pattern now of the government will tell you one day that something is not going to happen, and the very next day they'll do a complete 180-degree about turn and tell you that actually it is going to happen. We had it just a couple of days ago, where the UK government announced that children going to secondary school in early September would not be expected to wear face masks in corridors and communal areas. The very next day, 24 hours later, the newspaper headlines are saying that Boris Johnson has decided that secondary school pupils will now have to wear face masks in corridors and communal areas. So they completely contradict themselves from one day to the next. That alone should be enough to tell people there's something not quite right here. So I've been encouraged by the large number of people who clearly have woken up, and it would have been inevitable. It would have been factored into all of this as collateral damage as far as the controllers of this narrative are concerned, that vast numbers of people would be woken up by all this madness. And I get confirmation daily from people that this is the case. Among those 100 or so emails that I mentioned that I get every single day, a large proportion of them are from people who I don't know, I've never met. You know, they're reaching out to me for the first time, having found me online, and they tell me that their sister or their mother or some guy on the job at work or their cousin or somebody close to them has woken up for the very first time to the fact that we're being lied to and the world is not the place they thought it was, as a direct result of all the mind control, all the propaganda, and all the trickery that's being played on us, the psychological torture by the mainstream media and the government. So that's a great thing. And many of these people say, my dad was the most stubborn person in the world, and I've been speaking to him for 10 years, trying to get him to read books and look at documentaries, and he doesn't want to know. The only thing he would ever take notice of is the BBC Evening News. And now he can see that they're lying to him. Even he, the most stubborn person on earth, is able to accept that things aren't as they should be. So that has to be an encouraging thing. It's obviously happened at an exponential rate among large numbers of people, but we just need that to continue, because things will reach a point, if it does continue exponentially, where we have enough people questioning the official narrative for it to really make a difference and really allow the wheels to fall off this whole scamdemic, and for the lies just not to stand up to scrutiny anymore. So we have to hope that that process is going to take place. In terms of positive change happening, I'm a researcher into truth/alternative/conspiracy type issues. So as a serious researcher, I cannot avoid addressing the fact that many people are talking about what is known as the Q plan, otherwise known as QAnon. I'm sure people are familiar with this narrative, but in a nutshell, it's the idea that there is this group calling themselves the Q group under what may be one individual or maybe a group of individuals identifying themselves just as Q, who are working from within the political system, the control system, what's known as the deep state cabal, largely in the United States, but it's an international affair. They're working in conjunction with Donald Trump, so the story goes, and they are working covertly behind the scenes to bring down this control system, this cabal, this criminal network that has been running the show around the world for a very long time. And part of this process involves the rescuing of children who have been kept captive in underground bases and tunnels where horrific things are being done to them. This is part of the international child trafficking rings that we're starting to hear quite a bit about. This is starting to seep into the mainstream media now. The vast scale of pedophilia and child trafficking that has been going on for the longest time. So, according to the Q plan, military missions are underway in several parts of the world to rescue these children from their captors and to hold the perpetrators of the absolute horror that's been getting done to them as part of the institutionalized ways of this sick satanic control system that we have, and bring them to justice. Also, there are other methods underway of dismantling the entire cabal and their financial system, their funding, and just every aspect of their operation. Now, when you mention the Q plan and the fact that Donald Trump may be doing very good work behind the scenes, but of course, by its very nature, this operation has to be covert, it has to be secretive, communication as to what's going on has to be done in coded cryptic form. Otherwise, if it were communicated blatantly, then first of all, the masses would be privy to what's going on, and it's not deemed appropriate for the general public to be privy to all this stuff just yet, because they're just not in any kind of emotional or spiritual state where they'd be able to handle the nature of the information that seemingly is going to come forward at some point. But also the Q group communicating overtly and explicitly what they're doing would of course notify their enemies as to what's happening and what their next move is likely to be. So it has to be cryptic, it has to be secretive. And of course this causes many people to question it, not be able to place any faith or trust in it, and to dismiss it all as a psyop, as something that's put there to disempower potential activists by making them think that all this stuff is going on and it's going to be great, it's going to be beneficial when it all comes out, and they themselves can just sit back and let the whole thing unfold. So opinion really does seem to be split 50-50 right down the middle as to whether there's validity to the Q plan or whether it is a psyop. And this is brought home to me through the correspondence that I get every day as well. People love to express their opinions, you may have noticed, and so I get people every day telling me that either it's a psyop or it's a genuine thing, it's going on, and it's amazing, and phenomenal times await us. So I don't think we're going to have to wait very long to know whether this is a thing or not, because so much of it hinges around the November election on November the 3rd, when the plan is for Donald Trump to sweep the board and have this spectacular return to a second term. And very soon after November, so those who claim to be insiders in the Q group claim, we're going to start to see some real action taking place. So in terms of whether I invest any of my hope in the Q plan, it's kind of impossible not to be honest, when you've heard some of this information and some of the things that the group have claimed would happen do seem to have happened. There does seem to be some evidence and some proof to suggest that there's validity to what's being claimed in the Q plan. As a researcher, I require evidence and proof before I can nail my colours to any claim that's being made. So it's not as if there's a complete lack of proofs and there's a complete lack of reason to believe there might be something to this. So I am cautiously, from the sidelines, without completely investing myself in it, holding out some hope for this whole thing to be valid. But at the same time, I'm not able to fully put all my hope into it, because if it does turn out to be nothing, it would be devastating and crushing, and something that so many people would just never recover from, to discover that it's been lies all along. But as I say, I'm a researcher. I can't ignore that this factor is going on and that many people are talking about it, and I'd be lying if I said I don't hold out some hope for it bringing about great things in the months to come, because Lord knows we all need some kind of hope, some kind of optimism, some kind of positivity to pin our hopes on in these times, don't we?
Well, absolutely. And of course we are substantially focused on the present. How can we not be? But at the same time, we have to realise, as George Orwell said through one of the characters in 1984, that who controls the past controls the future. And we all want a positive future. And part of obtaining a positive future means putting right our understanding of the past. And so one of the things you'll be helping to do in joining this revolutionary act of the conference is moving away from a continuous fixation on the present to one focused on producing a more accurate picture of our past. And in that connection, you'll be giving 3 talks, thank you so much, Mark, at the next Questioning History event on the 18th to the 20th of December this year. And I wonder if you could possibly give us a sneak preview of these 3 talks. I know that you'll be opening the event by looking at the historical roots of the current situation, and they are intriguing and fascinating. But you'll also be going into 2 other topics, I think. Can you tell us a little bit about these 3 talks?
Well, sure, and I appreciate the invitation to be a part of the event. Last year's was great. That happened in December 2019. We were all blissfully unaware of what the months of 2020 would hold for us. And it was like the last days of normal, in inverted commas, before the COVID new world came in. So it's great to be back at the event, and I appreciate you asking me to open it as well. So I'm going to be doing on the Friday afternoon, a talk entitled The Pandemic, History and Timeline Behind This Event. And this is me presenting what I consider to be absolute proof that there was foreknowledge of this whole coronavirus narrative a very long time before it came in. And I'm talking years before it got unleashed on the general public. The general public is always the last to know. So in terms of the architects of this, the controllers of it who dreamt up the whole thing, there's evidence in 2 forms to show this foreknowledge. The first part kind of dovetails back into my main area of work, which is looking at the entertainment industry, And there's this phenomenon which I've exposed many times in previous talks and in my books, which is known as predictive programming. And this is where elements and aspects of a real-world event which is known to be coming are encoded cryptically into works of popular culture. So it can be movies, it can be TV shows, it can be music videos, it can be live stage events, it can be cartoons, magazines, ads, anything that is going to be viewed by large numbers of people where the opportunity exists to get into the subliminal minds of large numbers of people and plant various images and icons and motifs that pertain to what is known to be coming. So I've uncovered many examples of foreknowledge of this so-called pandemic in movies and TV shows and such in the months and years leading up to 2020. Some of them are quite cryptic and well hidden. Others are so blatant and in your face that they might as well be beating you around the head with a baseball bat saying, I'm predicting the coronavirus of 2020. So I've got a long slew of examples of these that I'll be showing in my presentation in the form of video clips and images. And if that's not enough for people, if people doubt that the idea of predictive programming is a thing, and the idea there is to get the concept of what is known to be coming so familiar to the general public through their subliminal minds that when the official narrative gets unleashed by the mainstream media and by governments and we're being asked to believe what they're saying to us, there's already a familiarity there, although people don't consciously recognise it because it's happening at a subliminal level. So this is a tactic that the controllers have been using for decades. It's worked very well for them. Whenever you find any kind of real-world event and you can pinpoint everything from 9/11 to the 7/7 attacks in London to all of these false flag so-called terror events that have been laid at the hands of ISIS over the past few months. What happened to ISIS, by the way? They're a bit quiet lately, aren't they? When you'd think that this pandemic, when everyone's locked away in their homes, would be the perfect opportunity for them to launch all these terror events on all these government buildings and all these places that aren't being guarded and watched. But, they don't seem to have been around. Maybe they've all gone down with COVID. But anyway, all of these events, there are examples of predictive programming. But if people reject that and they don't feel that it's a thing, and the reason they plant these things in these movies and stuff, by the way, goes into spiritual principles, and it goes into the belief systems of these sick, depraved, psychopathic individuals that are pulling these stunts, where they really do believe that if they communicate to us in as coded and as covert a form as they like, their intentions, what they plan to do, they've somehow got themselves off the karmic hook, and they've escaped the retribution that they would otherwise reap under spiritual law by letting us know what was happening. As far as they're concerned, if we're too dumb or too distracted to recognise what's being communicated to us, that's our lookout. It's not their problem. They've done their bit by communicating it. Now the onus is on us. It's a very sick, twisted, depraved way of looking at it, but they're very sick, twisted and depraved individuals after all. So if predictive programming is not enough for people in terms of proofs that this coronavirus thing was known to be coming and all the various aspects of it, the social distancing, the mask wearing, the lockdowns, all of this destruction of the economy, the demonisation of cash, the excuse to bring in mandatory vaccinations and digital currency and all this, then I've got loads of examples of documentation coming out of many of these elite think tanks that show that it was being planned for many years in advance. Most notably, there's a document that came out of the Rockefeller Foundation from 2010. It's become known as the Lockstep Document, and it goes into great detail of the measures that would be put into place to deal with a worldwide pandemic should one arise, just on the off chance, and all the things that would have to be done. And you read the pages of this document and it's like reading the daily newspapers from 2020, because all the boxes are ticked and everything that's been introduced these past few months is right there in that document. You've also got real world events such as the Event 201, which took place in New York City in October 2019, just 2 months before we're told this virus came out of Wuhan, China, and started spreading around the world. This was spearheaded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, would you believe?
Surprise, surprise.
Exactly. When you get into the fine detail of it, you discover that Bill Gates is absolutely bloody everywhere. He's got his finger in every pie going, and he's funded just about every aspect of this scandemic as well. He's got interests in the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, his own foundation, of course, the Gavi Vaccine Group. He's personally funded various members of UK government, including Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock, Chris Whitty. You know, the trail always leads back to Bill Gates. And so there was this Event 201 event just a few weeks before the COVID-19 thing kicked off, where they're doing this preparedness event, and they're predicting what would have to be done should a beastly virus affect the entire world. And of course, it was entirely known to be coming. I've even got a video clip from Event 201 where, rounding up at the end of the conference, the presenter says, okay, so we now know what's going to happen when the pandemic comes. Not if it comes, but when it comes, because they knew damn well what was just around the corner. So I'm going to be presenting all that kind of evidence for people to hopefully reach the inevitable conclusion that this was known to be coming, it was planned for, it's no random thing that took the world by surprise, very far from it. So do you want me to go into the other talks I'll be giving as well?
Oh, please do, yes.
Okay, so there are two other talks that I had intended to present at the conference, Questioning History, before you asked me to do the opening one as well. So one of them is titled The Black Heart of the BBC, Reality and Fiction. So the BBC has been a bit of a hobby horse of mine for many years. I went into some detail in one of the early chapters of my book Musical Truth Volume 1 about the very unsavoury aspects of the British Broadcasting Corporation, or the British Brainwashing Corporation, as many people refer to it now. I mean, you know, we had the revelations of Jimmy Savile and everything that he apparently got up to on BBC premises. You know, so many of the people that have accused him of being a paedophile and a sexual molester say that these activities took place in his dressing room on BBC premises, which is paid for by, you know, the licence payers of the UK, publicly funded. And all these revelations came out after Savile's death, not while he was alive, of course, but a year after he passed away. So this was all in 2012. But it really is the tip of the iceberg, because the pedophilia stuff runs very, very deep in the BBC. There are so many employees, you know, household name celebrities, and also behind-the-scenes executives within the BBC that have either been exposed as paedophiles or have had these accusations kind of hanging over them for many years, and suspicions that they were into all this kind of stuff. You know, one or two you could dismiss as just an unfortunate thing, but when it keeps happening, it becomes a trend, it becomes a pattern. So I'll be going into a lot of that. Just recently, very topically actually, there have been a few demonstrations, a few protest events taking place in London, and they always seem to end up outside Broadcasting House, this iconic building that the BBC has been broadcasting from since, I think it was 1930. And there's a statue which was carved by a known paedophile by the name of Eric Gill. So, you know, it's on public record that he was an abusive pedophile and he abused his own children, and you know, he's very notorious for what he got up to. But he was a sculptor, and he was commissioned to put together this piece, which is known as Ariel and Prospero, from one of Shakespeare's plays. And it adorns the main entrance to Broadcasting House. So the sculpture consists of a naked male adult with a naked male child writhing against his crotch. And,
wow.
And the expression on the face of the adult is one of, you know, bliss, and he's clearly enjoying the experience. So these protests have ended up outside Broadcasting House these past few weeks, where the crowd seemingly spontaneously have just started shouting, you know, paedophiles. The BBC is a paedophile organisation, it protects paedophiles, and they've been getting some very unwelcome exposure from this, and I think that's only going to continue. There's many more events planned in London in the coming weeks, and I think they're all going to spend a bit of time outside Broadcasting House. So there seems to be quite a bit of public awareness of the fact that the BBC's got this sordid sort of reputation hanging over it. There's also quite a few unexplained deaths that have happened with various celebrities from the corporation over the years. So I'll be looking into Rick Mayall, the comedian who was part of the Young Ones. So Rick Mayall died very suddenly in 2014, and it was seemingly to do with heart complications. But very interestingly, a short while before he died, he'd taken part in a film called One by One. It was released at the beginning of 2014. And part of the narrative of that film involves his character exposing the New World Order, this network of secret societies that are said to control the world. And he's talking about their plans for population reduction. So they're blatantly using terms like the New World Order. They're talking about things like the Georgia Guidestones. And Rick Mayall's character is, really spilling the beans on all this stuff for a mainstream audience. There's also an outtake of Rick Mayall when he was doing some filming for a show, again, not long before he passed away, where he says to the camera, turn off your television. Your television is mind control. Don't pay attention to it. And he says, I might be dead by the time you see this, which is quite chilling to hear when you consider that he did die very suddenly, not too long after, saying that. You've got other people from the BBC, such as, there's the Jill Dando situation. Jill Dando, the news reporter, was shot in the head on the doorstep of her house back in 1999. Much research has gone into that whole affair, and it's indicated that she herself was investigating possible paedophile rings and their ties and attachments to the BBC, for which she worked at that time. And her murder remains unsolved to this day. There was a guy that was stitched up with it for some time, went to jail. Turns out he was innocent. He had to be released and pardoned, and nobody knows who killed her to this day, but there are plenty of suspicions about it. There's also all kinds of stuff. There was this guy called Mark Spate, who was a children's entertainer on CBeebies, the CBeebies children's channel out of the BBC. And he had a girlfriend called Natasha Collins. She turned up dead in a bathtub under very suspicious circumstances a few years ago. And Mark Spate was called to question about it, and there were accusations that he had supplied her with Class A drugs, which may have contributed to her death. Death by bathtub is something that's come up many times in my research into the music industry. There's something symbolic and ritualistic about people turning up dead in baths. So then Mark Spate himself, just about 3 months after his girlfriend Natasha Collins turns up dead, himself turns up dead. He's found hanging from a disused building just opposite Paddington Station in London, where very few people go. So he's just found hanging from the rafters there. And that death has been unexplained to this day as well. So again, one or two of these could be considered an unfortunate thing, but when it keeps happening, it starts to become a trend. And you start to question, what the hell is it about the BBC? And the BBC is, of course, a propaganda arm of the government. It's state-controlled, and it is the voice of the government. And it has been throughout this whole COVID-19 situation. So whatever you hear on the BBC Evening News is what the government and the controllers of this narrative want the general public believing. And because of the job that they've done over the decades of building up the BBC to be seen as apparently this bastion of truth and integrity that you can trust, this great British institution, that is sadly the view that many people, particularly older people, still seem to have of the BBC. And so they would never question anything that comes out of the BBC Evening News. But we can look at so many examples of how the BBC News has blatantly lied to the general public over the years. I won't even go into them now, but I'll be detailing them in the presentation. And it just amazes me that people still give them another chance when they've lied to them on so many occasions, and they can be shown and proved to have been lies. And I just wonder, if a confidence trickster knocked on your front door and asked you to invest £100 in this great scheme that he's got and promised that you'd get returns from it, and you gave the guy the benefit of the doubt, and you handed him £100 of your cash, and he disappeared, and you heard nothing from him, and then a year later the same guy comes knocking on your door and says, hello, I've got a great investment opportunity for you, all you need to do is give me £100. It's like somebody going, okay, here's another £100, when already the guy has scammed them and lied to them, and yet they give him another chance. And people do that with the BBC. They lie to them all the time. They can be shown and proved to be lies, and yet they still believe them the next time they come out and tell them something else. So I'll be covering all of that. The BBC, in my estimation, is a very dark, very sinister organisation, and it needs exposing. Thankfully, many people have been doing that, and I suspect will continue to do so in the coming weeks and months, but that's part of what I'll be doing at the event as well. And then the third talk that I'll be doing is titled The Manufacturing of the 1960s Hippie Power Scene, or the 1960s Hippie Dream. And this again ties into work that I've done in my books and my previous talks related to the music industry. It's detailed in Musical Truth Volume 1. So people imagine the hippie counterculture scene of the late 1960s, which grew up out of California in the United States, and there was a very distinctive counterculture scene in London at exactly the same time, coming out of, Carnaby Street and the whole idea of swinging London and all of this. And the Beatles were a big part of that whole scene, as were the Rolling Stones. And then over in the States, you had all these hippie sort of flower power bands playing folk rock and country rock and all of this. It was new music, it was new drugs, it was the appearance of LSD in massive quantities everywhere and other kinds of hallucinogenics. And there were all kinds of social movements going on at the time as well, like the Black Panther scene and the feminist movement. And it was a time of great cultural change. And it's been assumed, it's been, part of the sort of public record all these decades, that it was an entirely organic and grassroots thing. It happened as a result of the young people at the time wanting to disassociate themselves from their parents' generation, wanting to express themselves, wanting to demonstrate their angst about things like the Vietnam War, which had just started up, all the other immoral, unjust things that were happening in the world. And they developed this whole scene. It was the fashion and the music and the drugs, and it was entirely coming from them. They were driving it, and it just caught on like wildfire and affected this entire generation. Well, there's been so much research in recent years, largely as a result of what we can now discover through the internet, if the will is there to go delving into it, that so much of what happened in that scene happened directly at the hands of military intelligence, and very largely at the hands of the CIA. There are documents available to show that many of the key figures in that counterculture scene of the United States were either in the direct employ of one of the intelligence agencies, or they were an asset that was called on by the CIA or these other organisations. And then when you take that over to the British side of things, there are connections for days going into MI5, MI6, British establishments of military intelligence. So it starts to appear as if that whole cultural scene was actually a very elaborate and very successful exercise in social engineering, coming out of these think tank organisations that specialise in shaping opinions and perceptions and thoughts and behaviours of the general public. So it's a devastating thing for anyone that came from those days to hear, that's got all this rose-tinted nostalgia for those great days of the late 60s. But, you either want the truth or you don't. And we've all been there. I've also done exposés on the electronic dance music scene coming out of the UK from the late 80s, the rave acid house culture, which I was very much a part of at the time. And I've got my own rose-tinted nostalgic memories of those times, but I've had to, unfortunately, begrudgingly accept that whole scene bears all the hallmarks of being socially engineered as well. So they do it to every generation. Nobody need feel hard done by that their scene doesn't appear to be as organic as we were told it was, because at the end of the day, they're all engineered and they're all put into place. And I think a lot of people now are ready to accept this kind of unfortunate, uncomfortable information, because they realise that we're living in changing times, and the truth of so many things, I think, is going to be revealed in the weeks and months ahead. And it's only, the headstrong, it's only those that are built for it that are going to be able to handle that type of information. But, that is the nature of the 3 talks that I'll be doing at Questioning History, and I hope I've sold them to you.
And the notion of engineering, of course, which you brought up in connection with the BBC and the hippie scene, links back to what you were saying about the current day and how the current situation may have been engineered over a period of decades. And in fact, one of the other speakers we have historian, will be looking at the Bayeux tapestry of all things.
It's taking it back a bit further than me.
and yeah, but he'll be looking at that as a piece of propaganda. So perhaps it's always been with us. And when you say that the truth will come out in the next few weeks and months, well, we can just wait with bated breath.
That's right.
And of course, a lot of this will come out in December. If God willing, we can go ahead with the event.
Sure.
In fact, you spoke at last year's event, Mark, and I wondered if you could possibly tell people who were not able to attend something about it and the opportunities that it offered for creating a community of like-minded people.
Yeah, well, it was very different to other truth conferences and meet-up groups that I attend and speak at, because many of them focus on current contemporary happenings, and speakers give their own sort of slant on what's going on at that time, whereas this event focuses on the past. I mean, I'm probably... My material is probably in the most recent past. I don't go back that far. But as you've said, many of the speakers go all the way back to the Bayeux Tapestry and Great Fire of London and the Great Plague and all these historical events. And with all of them, we've been entrained and indoctrinated to think about them in a particular way. There's the official Wikipedia version of what happened. And there's been so much revisionist history in recent years, and I don't use that term in a derogatory manner. I mean, through the research that we're now able to do for ourselves, any inquiring mind is able to uncover information on its own about what may have gone on, and we discover that it conflicts with the official version in so many cases. So we had many examples of that at last year's event, not least through your own talks, Gloria. And the common factor between all the speakers, I think, was challenging the official version of all these historical events. So, if we realise we're being lied to now about what's going on, then maybe this has always been the case. And if we accept that we have a control system in place now, which is multi-generational, and it's been here for a very long time, then maybe expressions of this control system have been responsible for all the lies and all the deceptions that we've been fed through the ages. So the Questioning History event is quite unique in that it focuses on the past, and it asks very searching questions of events that we think we know all about, but maybe there's more to know about them. And of course, in every case, it turns out there is. And then on top of that, it's just the networking and the opportunity for camaraderie. And as I said at the start of this show, I think we need that more now than ever. So many people that get in touch with me through my correspondence tell me that they're just pining to get together and have that human contact with like-minded people again, and just look them in the whites of their eyes, not through a bloody WhatsApp screen, in the flesh. So some great conversations were had at last year's event, in the breaks and at meal times and such. It turned out to be a very stimulating time for everyone that was there. So I truly hope it gets to happen again this December, because there's some great value to it.
Yes, well, let's hope. And feedback was positive, but one of the things that people did ask for was more time for socialising. And so this year I've decided to go for 2 nights rather than just the single night that we had last year. And 2 nights, so that people have more time to be together and exchange views. And as you say, we need this more than ever, because we've been staring at screens for I don't know how long, how many months. We've been staring at screens. So this year's event will be a 2-night event, starting with your talk on Friday afternoon and finishing on at tea time on Sunday afternoon.
Right. Absolutely. And we do socialising, not social distancing.
Absolutely. As you
nothing
said
social about it.
We're not interested in anti-social distancing.
That's right. And if I see anyone wearing a mask, I'm going to kick them out of the room myself.
Yes. I think we control the key to the room, so
right.
We have the power to do that, I think.
The mask
Thank you
is a muzzle.
so much, Mark, for your fascinating insights. And I'm sure much of what you expressed about the current situation will mirror the thoughts of many of your listeners. So very reassuring to hear what you're thinking about the current situation.
Yeah, thank you. Do we just want to give people the web address then where they can make bookings? Should we do that?
Oh, that's a good idea, yes. Do you want to read that out? I think you've got...
Okay, well, I've got the flyer here, so I can just read what it says under bookings. Weekend ticket, including all talks, full board with veggie and vegan meal options and 2 nights accommodation. This is on Friday the 18th and Saturday the 19th of December. It's the weekend before Christmas. Great way to spend it. £235 for all of that. You can get a day ticket for individual days from £70, and there's special early bird rates until the 1st of September, so act quick on those. And then the website to get further information and make the bookings is learningholidays.webs.com. That's learningholidays.webs.com, and there's an email address, learningholidays@protonmail.com. So that's where you get all the info. The other speakers that are listed are Andrew Goff, Jerry Doherty, Professor David Bates, Gloria Moss, of course, yourself, and I think there's a few others, isn't there?
Well, anybody who comes along who would like to share some of their own research with us, we'd love to see a synopsis of what you'd like to present. And then there are spots on Friday evening and Saturday evening when you can have the platform. So, you know, that there's the floor is open, really, to lots of ideas and lots of people. This is an inclusive event, a friendly event. So if you come along and you don't know anybody, well, by the end of the weekend, we hope you'll have an address full of new names.
Yeah, I think that's what happened last year.
Yeah, people came away with address books full of new names and new friends, new relationships, you know, and of course, head buzzing with lots of new ideas.
Well, that's right, yeah. Good way to start Christmas, right?
Well, and, you know,
whatever the hell that's going to look like this year.
You have books that people can buy, and you can, I think you signed copies for many people last year. So this is a Christmas gift with a difference, isn't it?
Well, it sure is, yeah.
And for those of us who forget to do our Christmas shopping, then it's a wonderful opportunity. You can just breeze your way into buying lots of books for family and friends.
It beats aftershave sets and quality street chocolates.
Yeah, one up on all of that. Some really stimulating books.
Right.
Yes. So let's just hope it goes ahead, this revolutionary act, as you say.
Yep, well, we're giving it our best shot. And so, again, that's 18th to the 20th of December, that whole weekend, Friday to Sunday. Oh, it takes place in Hertfordshire, by the way, if people are wondering. A little bit north of London. I mean, do you want to give the exact location, or do you want to leave that until people book?
Yeah, it's on the website, but it's a very good point. It's half an hour's train journey from Liverpool Street to Broxbourne Station. And then it's a 5-minute mini-car journey from there to the rather pleasant centre that will accommodate us for the long weekend.
That's right.
It's a very easy journey from London. In fact, last year we had people flying in from, where? Hong Kong, Spain, South America, quite apart from the brave people who made it all the way from Yorkshire down to Hertfordshire.
Okay, so yeah, learningholidays.webs.com again for all that info.
Yes, and thank you, Mark. And well, let's hope, and I look forward to hearing from people.
Yeah, and who knows what the world is going to look like by December. Hopefully, a whole lot better than it does now. I'm actually, I know I say I'm up and down all the time, but when I think ahead to December, I'm very optimistic about where we'll be at. I think this scam that we've all been living under will have been exposed to a very large degree by then. Who knows what may or may not have come out of the Q and Trump camp after that November election, which it looks as if Trump is going to win, although who knows what will happen. 4 months is a long time, in current circumstances. So who knows what things will look like? But I'm quite optimistic about where we'll be by then.
Yeah, and I'd like to second that. I mean, there was an enormous event in Ireland in recent days,
Dublin,
which attracted a vast crowd, and there's another event this Saturday, I believe, in London's Trafalgar Square.
I'll be there.
Yes,
come on down.
Likewise, yes. So I could imagine that will attract a big multitude as well. So I'm optimistic too that we're on a wave here.
Sure, let's keep it going.
Thank you, Mark.